Hello, everybody, and welcome to this recording of the Activist Lawyer podcast, brought to you from the Granite Podcast Studio in the heart of Newry City. We are delighted that you could join us as we start this new journey through Activist Lawyer, where we will be discussing matters that matter, engaging not only with lawyers, but people who are committed to highlighting and combating injustices and inequalities. We will bring you our thoughts and invite you to share yours. We will be looking for contributors to our blog and our podcast series, as we want your perspective as we unravel and unpack a plethora of issues that have probably always been here, but have really been brought to the fore this year, 2020, a very unsettling time for many. All is not lost, and we will be remembering those who hold a light in difficult times, celebrating activists within our local communities and those further afield who offer us hope and inspiration. My name is Sarah Henry, and I am a solicitor practicing in Newry City. I worked with a human rights firm in Dublin for many years and with a number of rights-based organisations and charities. I'm joined today by Jack McClelland, who is a law student at Queen's University Belfast studying a Masters in Law. He has an interest in human rights, criminal justice and immigration. Jack also has the unenviable task as working as my legal assistant. So thank you, Jack, for helping out with the Activist Lawyer podcast today.
No problem.
Okay, so the title of today's podcast, this is our first session, is really timely. Activist Lawyer, Insults and Inspiration. Yeah, so a little bit of a negative connotation there, but we're also going to go through some positive aspects of the current times that we live in. So, lefty lawyers, activist lawyers, loudmouth lawyers. Have I left anyone out, Jack?
You forgot about do-gooder lawyers.
Oh, sorry, the do-gooders, that's right. Those attacks on people who actually work for the voluntary sector. I think these came from Miss Priti Patel, the Home Secretary last week. And is it really a case that she's attacking those that do good? So we've been looking at this in great detail over the last few weeks, and we as lawyers, and of course just members of the public, are now familiar with the bombardment of insults hurled at the legal profession by those in senior positions of public office. Jack, you've heard it all. Who am I talking about here, or who are we referring to?
Yeah, well, it's come from the top. So it's come from the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the Home Secretary Priti Patel, and spokespeople from the Home Office, all led by Priti Patel herself.
Oh, gosh, wow. So really those at the very top, as Jack has said. And really, this has been going on for some time now. A few weeks ago, people might remember the Home Office issued a tweet as part of a new campaign, and I think it attached to a video. And in the context of that tweet, it referred to the activist lawyers, these dangerous group of people who are pretty much hampering the process and stalling the asylum system, this broken asylum system. And then, so I think they retracted that, or they deleted it, and somebody from within the Home Office apologised. But then again, lo and behold, we have the Home Secretary again referring to lawyers by slinging insults at them. I think most recently it was at a Conservative Party conference that she lashed out at, quote, the traffickers, the do-gooders, the lefty lawyers and the Labour Party who are defending the broken asylum system. And then, of course, as you pointed out, Jack, the Prime Minister picked up on these comments and actually used them again a couple of days later. So we know that the Law Society has issued a statement around this, and the president of the Law Society of Northern Ireland, Rowan White, quickly jumped up and issued a defence of lawyers and said it was deeply troubling to hear the Prime Minister repeat the Home Secretary's recent attack on so-called lefty lawyers for representing refugees and asylum seekers. So today we're not just going to focus on asylum and migration and refugees, etc. We're going to focus on this use of language, how it's quite toxic and it's becoming the norm, and we're really getting used to it. So, it seems to be, as we said, part of society now. But how damaging is this? And is there anything positive that we can take away from this? So this started the wheels in motion again to kind of spur this debate onwards. And Jack, as a student of the law, how do you look at this, and how have your colleagues been picking this up?
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about this in class, especially after our first year studying law. We studied about the separation of powers and how the government should be separate from the judicial system. But over the last number of weeks and months, comments obviously from Priti Patel and Boris Johnson have completely destroyed that premise of separation of powers, because they've taken it upon themselves to criticise the judicial system basically as a whole, not even just concentrating on immigration issues. So it has annoyed people who are studying law, especially in my class, that we're going on to practice law and we feel like we're being criticised then by the government for wanting to carry out, or basically lawyers are carrying out their jobs and being criticised for it. And as you're saying, it could be a slip of the tongue. It could be anger from the government based on solicitors working in the immigration system, but it's clearly not a slip of the tongue, because it's been backed up by Boris Johnson, as you said. The Home Office deleted tweets, but they didn't really apologise for it. So it's a deliberate use of language to put a negative turn on lawyers. And they've done it in the past, and they'll probably continue to do it in the future, to use specific language to put a negative turn on lawyers, and especially around the immigration system, which is a serious topic that people find very, very
emotive. And
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So it's really these trends. And as you said, it really does continue. I was reading an article recently in The Guardian by the former BBC Director General, Mark Thompson, and he's picked up on this, as many people have. But it's just a really interesting quote here. These trends have many social, economic and political causes. But public language, the language we use when we discuss politics or policy, or make our case in court, or try to persuade anyone of anything else in a public context, seems to me to be at the heart of the matter. Indeed, I believe we are living through what amounts to a crisis in public language. So, I mean, is this a crisis? How serious is this? I mean, we have the Law Society defending people to say maybe, solicitors and lawyers are at risk of serious harm and at risk of attack. I mean, these are quite strong words. So I agree with you, Jack, as well. I mean, these aren't a slip of the tongue kind of situation. I think these are deliberate, carefully constructed words, and a very deliberate ploy to really garner support from the public and to plant a seed in the public's mind and get things kind of stirred up again. I'm afraid for me, a lot of this harks back to the language of Enoch Powell. Years ago I read a book, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Bloody Foreigners by Robert Winder. And it really rattled me about how people at the top, use such horrendous language against ethnic minorities and minority groups. And at a time, this would have actually included Irish people in the UK as well. And the book remembers Enoch Powell as the Conservative MP, infamous for his 1968 speech, The Rivers of Blood. And really, what we're looking at here today has much changed. I mean, that was back years and years ago. But the language there, yes, it was more direct. We could say that things are somewhat a little bit muted now. But Jack, I mean, have things changed? How has language moved on? And are we still where we were at, only in a more carefully constructed way?
Yeah, racism has become definitely more subtle, but especially with the introduction of laws to stop racial discrimination, whether it be act or speech, and therefore racism has definitely become more subtle, but it's still there. But as you've seen from Farage with the Brexit campaign, he based his whole campaign on anti-immigration and used specific language and specific words to gain support from his target audience. And you could say that the whole Brexit campaign was won on anti-immigration. I know that a lot of reports have come out now after Brexit, and it's too late to see the truth. Yeah, we're there.
Seems.
And the Labour Party have basically said that they're not going to fight us leaving the EU, which it's over now. But a lot of reports have come out, both for Farage and for in terms of the anti-immigration myths that he was putting out, and according to Money as well, about the money that was supposedly going to go into the NHS after we left Europe, and it's all come out as basically lies. But
the language around that was very strong. I mean, what I pick up most from the or from the Leave campaign was the whole anti-immigration, about jobs, protect our NHS. And I think a few reports, I think the Migrant Advisory Committee issued a report that really dispels some of these myths that we might talk about a little bit later. But really, we don't have to go too far back in time. Now, you're much, much younger than me, Jack. I'm the oldest here. You might not be able to tell. But we'll think about another iconic person who really used language in a very, very careful, considered way. Not considerate, but looking at Margaret Thatcher, who, of course, was the leader of the Conservative Party between 1975 and 1990, and who also served as the UK Prime Minister between 1979 and 1990. I did not realise it was that long, but she was really a master at influencing the public through the use of strong words. And whatever we think about her, her actions, her image, her words became iconic. And we were looking recently at, when we were discussing all of this, a 1978 interview for the current affairs programme World in Action. And she claimed that British people feared being swamped. So this was the big word that she used, by immigrants from the new Commonwealth and Pakistan. When asked by the interviewer how severely she would cut the immigration numbers if she got to power, she replied, "If we went on as we are, then by the end of the century, there would be 4 million people of the new Commonwealth or Pakistan here." Now, that is an awful lot, and I think it means that people are really rather afraid that the country might be rather swamped by people with a different culture. She goes on to say, "The British character has done so much for democracy, for law, and done so much throughout the world that if there is any fear that it might be swamped by people, people are going to react and be rather hostile to those coming in." Following this interview, Enoch Powell, who we referred to earlier, expressed his hope and relief at Thatcher's comments. Thatcher was elected Prime Minister the following year. So you see here how her words really, really helped shape society. And I saw a follow-up to that interview where the reporter goes off and asks people on their perceptions and what they took away from that. And they all really, a lot of them agreed with her, even though they didn't actually support her, because she used powerful language. And then after this, of course, we see references to floods, swamping, influxes, and similar analogies have consistently been used by politicians to win seats, setting a kind of a narrative, and figures can actually dispel these myths, and it's often false and inflated. Yeah, what you were basically saying, Jack.
Yeah, so what we were talking about earlier about some reports that have come out after Brexit, one of the myths that were dispelled by facts and figures was that how cheap labour depressed the British workers' pay. Mm-hmm. And a report from the Migration Advisory Committee basically stated that in terms of wages, the existing evidence and the analysis we present in the report suggests that migration is not a major determinant on the wages of UK-born workers. But it's a bit too late now.
And that's just one of many, I imagine. Yeah. So that's the UK, but then of course we have a whole other kettle of fish across the water, where we have Donald Trump, the Wordsworth of our time.
This podcast is sponsored by Granite Exchange. Do you need an office or a meeting room space? Granite Exchange is the ultimate serviced office and meeting room facility. Located in the heart of Newry City, it is perfectly placed between Belfast and Dublin. Each office suite is fully furnished and comes with an all-inclusive monthly fee with no long-term contract. All you have to do is show up and switch on. The rest is taken care of. For more information, call 028 3044 2500 or visit www.granite-exchange.com.
So the UK and the US are continually becoming more similar day by day. So you've got Donald Trump with 3 simple words, but had a serious message that targeted a lot of people and basically led him to win the 2016 election. And the 3 words were "build that wall." Not only did that mean build the wall and keep Mexicans out, and it actually being a physical wall, but it meant for the whole country keeping people out from coming into the almighty USA.
So rather than it just being, as you say, like a physical structure, it was an ideology, and something that it became embedded in people's minds as a symbol of let's protect our borders, and it feeds into the whole Brexit narrative that was happening at the same time. It's about this us and them kind of concept, and I think build that wall. I mean, he captured it perfectly. I mean, completely awful remarks, and we would never support that language.
Yeah.
But it's effective. And when I think about the 2016 campaign between Trump and Clinton, I think of his language more than hers. And another thing, this is the first time we've got a president, using Twitter as a tool to communicate his message, more than ever. And it just takes him 3 or 4 or 5 words to captivate billions of people around the world, because of course his message goes out to millions and it influences them. So really his language is chosen by him, whether he thinks about it too much, I can't imagine, but whatever he says influences the young, the old, wherever they are.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for him is to get tweets out, no matter what the tweets say. He's put out a serious amount of tweets that do not make sense, but he wants to keep his brand there. Obviously the marketing people behind him just know that today's society is based all on social media, so he's putting out whatever and whenever he wants, which is smart. No matter if you agree with his tweets or not, it's a smart strategy, because all people talk about now is what Donald Trump is tweeting.
But they're effective nonetheless. And even my 6-year-old daughter recently asked, did that wall ever get built? I don't know if it has. You might know, Jack. It's almost there. Not that it's important. But
I've seen a couple of pictures, and you never know today whether they're real or not. But I've seen a couple of structures being put up in the desert. Yeah,
right.
But yeah.
Structures in the desert. So the fact remains that 6-year-old children know about Build That Wall, and that's actually quite scary, isn't it? But yes, reaching millions of people around the world with his carefully chosen language and his tweets. What else has been going on in the US that you've been looking into, Jack?
Yeah, so as was mentioned earlier about George Floyd and how that has impacted here, and how other incidents in the UK has impacted as well. For some people that don't know, the George Floyd incident that sparked outrage across the world, it was an event that happened on the 25th of May in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a 46-year-old black man named George Floyd who was arrested after using a supposed $20 bill that was counterfeit to buy stuff out of a store. The police arrived, and the events that followed, George Floyd lost his life. Mm-hmm. And that sparked outrage as it was filmed. It was filmed and put onto the internet, and as we know, today's society, it shot across the world, and millions, if not billions, of people seen it. The words that he used that really got to people were, "I can't breathe," as he lay under the knee of the police officer that has now been arrested, and hopefully justice does follow.
So really, it's almost like out of these tragedies come strength.
Yeah.
And strength in numbers, strength in words, and strength through actions. It's really soul destroying to think of that. And it's really harrowing, isn't it, that those words that were actually spoken by people who later lost their lives were picked up. But I suppose that's the positive energy that comes out of this. And in the midst of all of this, let's not forget we are in the middle of a pandemic. And that's just a catalyst to bring all of this to the fore. And even that itself is showing the divides within society. So we're all dealing with a lot. And 2020 will go down as really a year in history. But something that we should also remember as well, just to kind of take a positive spin on all of this, although it's not positive to say that we sadly this year lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we know was just a formidable force, one of the Supreme Court justices in the United States. And really, I think it's timely that we speak about her, especially now that we're talking about language and these particular insults that are hurled at lawyers against people, who work and stand up for the vulnerable within our community. And just looking at her, the words and the language and speeches following her passing really focus on her transformational role in ending centuries of legal discrimination against women. We think about her dissents, in the pursuit of justice, her own strategy of encouraging people not just to listen, but to really hear and to go along with her. We've seen how she carefully chose her words, realising the impact that they would have on others. And when we were looking at this, I find it really interesting. I've been reading a lot about her recently, but she followed a school of thought inspired by Vladimir Nabokov, who taught her European literature in Cornell when she was a student. And he stressed the careful selection of perfect words. And I think throughout her lifetime, she was witness to verbal assaults on both her office, but also on the judiciary. And this, as we see today, Jack has given loads of examples there, sadly continues. And ultimately, I mean, what happens when a politician or someone in power uses this language and relies on insults against lawyers to further their own agenda? This not only exposes lawyers to a risk of harm, but also in a very sinister way does serve to undermine the legal system and, of course, the rule of law. So I suppose on the flip side of all of this, and I mean, we see it as a response from these so-called activist lawyers and the like, they really have taken to own the term. And I think we've both seen that, Jack. I mean, especially on social media, you see the loudmouth lawyer and activist lawyers. People are proud and they're embracing it. And it's really shining a light on the work that they do. And I think that's what we've seen. It's almost like a pattern. Something happens, something bad, and then people are really latching onto it and owning it and standing up for what they believe in, and really, using social media and using all of these tools to get their message across. An activist lawyer, loudmouth lawyer, all of these, the lefty lawyers, people are proud of that and they've latched onto it. So although it was meant in a very derogatory term, and it was insulting, and it still has to be. I mean, it's good that the Bar Council and the law societies have come up and stood up for their lawyers and really represented them. It's great that people do now feel encouraged, and they should feel encouraged and supported in their work as they continue this work. And you can speak on behalf of students as well, Jack. How are students really grasping, this movement? And
I think it's so important, especially when somebody criticises you or uses derogatory terms. Especially something as ridiculous as activist lawyer, instead of suppressing that language, I think it's so important to really not accept it, but grab onto it and say, yes, we're activists, and that's not a bad thing. I don't know why some ridiculous thing that the UK government and the American government are doing is using activists as a bad term.
Yeah, as a bad term.
But I think the most important thing is to grab onto it and run with it.
And
do positive things out of it, and that's the best thing to do.
It is, and that's what we'll do here. We want to work to explore, the work that people are doing, those activists within our community as this series continues. And I suppose we'll come across, who knows what's around the corner next week. And so, look, on that note, I think we'll end our session today, and we invite you and your colleagues to participate in this conversation, get involved. You'll be able to contribute maybe to our podcast and also to our blog. The details will be found in the links. You've been listening to the Activist Lawyer podcast, recorded at the Granite Podcast Studio in Newry City. I have been Sarah Henry and joined today by Jack McClelland. So thank you so much. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.